To go.
Okay.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, this is Brad Chase, Chairman of the Harwich Conservation Commission. Welcome you to the meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission for October 21st, 2020. I hope everyone's doing well, everyone's healthy. I'll start off by reading a statement from Governor Baker's office related to the open meeting law. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Town of Harwich Conservation Commission on October 21st, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. will be conducted via remote participation. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Harwich website at www.harwich-ma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so via recording on demand on the Harwich Channel 18 website or on our Town of Harwich YouTube page. So let's get started. The first item on the agenda is a request for a change in plans, and this is for the kelp farm on Nantucket Sound, SC 32-2346. Is Mr. Kelleher present?
He's not, Brad. He asked if I thought it was necessary. We did hear from John Rendon that there was no issue, and that was what the commission was waiting for, was to hear essentially the okay from John that he didn't see an issue with navigation with keeping this 25-foot section in year-round. So, and he did not. So I thought that's all we were waiting for.
Okay. Well, I think what I'll do is I'll put a motion on the table, and then we'll under discussion, if anybody wants to speak to it, they can. I think we did discuss it a fair amount last time. So I will move that we approve the request for a change in plan for the kelp farm on Nantucket Sound, SE 32-2346.
And this is Stan. I'll second it.
Okay, so Stan seconds it. So under discussion, anyone have additional thoughts or comments on this? Okay. Any comments from members of the audience? Okay, I think we all were in fair support of what was being proposed. We were just waiting on the Harbor Master's office to chime in. So seeing no further comments, all those in favor say aye.
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 You've got a roll call, Brad. Sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, thanks for reminding me, Amy.
No
okay,
problem.
I'm going to start. I've got John Ketchum first.
John Ketchum is an aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
And myself, Brad Chase, aye. So the motion carries unanimously.
And Stan, aye.
Oh, sorry, Stan. All right, working off the cobwebs so far. So, okay, so that motion carries. Next on the agenda, we have 49 Nons Road, map 5, parcel W1-20, and they're seeking to change the configuration of their pilings. Do we have a representative here tonight of the project?
Yeah, hi, this is Chris DiPilato from Crossrip Ocean Services. The contract is scheduled to rebuild their pier.
Hi, Chris.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Do you want to briefly describe what's intended?
So what the client would like to do is, right now the current pier has stub pilings, and then 4x4s go up from the stub piling for the deck of the pier. What they would like to do, instead of doing stub pilings, is to do a full piling and eliminate the need for the 4x4 connection on the stub piling. That piling would still end up at the same height as the 4x4 would go. And the second change you would like is their current float is held in place by 4 metal pipes, and he would like to change that to 2 permanent wooden pilings that would be placed on the inshore side of the float.
Okay. Amy, do you have a summary for us?
Sure. They have an active permit that also allows for maintenance. And so what they would like to do, I think in the long run, is going to be less invasive to the environment, because instead of driving pipe piles every year, you're going to have 2 8-inch permanent wood pilings instead of the 4 pipe piles to hold the float. And I don't see any big difference between stub pilings with 4x4s that you attach every year and the permanent pilings. So I thought this was applicable as a change in plan. There's no footprint change from what they have, and their dock is in compliance with their old permit plan. So I would recommend approval of the change for them. I think it's fairly minor.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Okay, so we'll go through all the commissioners to look for comments. I'll start with you, John.
Yeah, I have no comments.
Okay. Let's see, next I have Jim.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with this one. Don't necessarily always agree that permanent pilings are the same as seasonal, but just the 2 on the outside, I don't see it making a big difference. So I'm in favor of it.
Okay, Mark.
No questions?
All right, Carolyn.
I have no questions.
All right, and Ernie.
I'm fine with this. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess I have a little concern about the
Hey, Brad?
piling. Yes. Oh, sorry, Stan.
That's okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to find.
I just didn't know if you were seeing me
Okay.
or not.
I got you. Okay, sorry, Stan. Go ahead.
No, I'm all set. No questions.
Okay. So I guess I have some concerns over the permanent pilings, and I don't think we often have wood pilings like that for the float. So is the reason just ease of maintenance? Is that the reason why this is being proposed?
I mean, he sees some of his neighbors have permanent wood pilings, so he thinks they're more secure than the metal pipe pilings, which I obviously agree. Obviously, in that body of water, I don't live there. I don't think it gets incredibly rough in there. It's pretty well in. But he sees his other neighbors have wood pilings, and he feels they are obviously much more secure.
Right. And
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I would just say we've seen them a little bit more recently in the Herring River, where you do have a little more current, obviously. We've had a couple this past year where they've wanted to either replace pipe pilings or just originally, with new docks, have been allowed to do permanent piles out there. This is Oyster Creek, so it is different. It's not as, you don't have the current, but you do have ice. But on the other hand, pipe piles are only in really in the summertime. But so it is up to the board. I just thought rather than, and Jim's right, it's not in every circumstance. But with putting, the repeated installation each year of just the pipe piles, I thought for just the 2 diameter wood pilings, that was my recommendation, but I just wanted to clarify.
Okay. And for the stub piles, those were originally proposed to, I guess, reduce year-round impacts. Was that the idea?
I mean,
Go ahead.
the plan from 30 years ago, I think the original plan was the dock was supposed to be completely removed every year, but I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, we did stub piles. That was kind of the norm, 20 plus years ago was to have stub piles. I would guess some still have them, but a lot of the newer ones we see come in front of us don't.
Right. Yeah, okay, I don't think I have a concern with the stub piles because the annual, deployment and removal requires some habitat disruption. So, okay, any comments, members of the audience? Okay, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the request for a change in plans for 49 Nuns Road.
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Carolyn. Any additional discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. I guess we'll have a roll call starting with John.
Aye.
Okay, Jim.
Aye.
And Mark.
Aye.
Okay, Carolyn,
Aye.
Ernie,
Aye.
and Stan.
Aye.
Okay, and so myself, Brad Chase, will be a nay. So we have the motion passing, what's that, 5-1. Okay, thank you very
6-1.
much.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, we have a request for a change of plan for 348 Route 28, map 21, parcel N1. And this is the mini golf project, and it's a request for a reduction in scope of work than what was originally permitted. We have a representative here tonight. Do you want to briefly describe the intentions?
Hey, good evening, everyone. Slav Yosef here, one of the applicants. I have Shannon Goheen, who is the landscaping designer, and my business partner, Steve Gupoyan. Basically, the original plan that we submitted and was approved by the Conservation Commission Board was for 36 holes, miniature golf. After going in front of the Zoning Board of Appeal, and discussing the project, we have reduced the scale of the project to only one 18-hole miniature golf. With that, we changed the layout, probably cut it, by the way you looking at it in front of you, we cut it in half pretty much, and we have almost doubled the landscaping, the proposed trees and shrubs in the area. Anybody else speaking now? So that's pretty much all we're doing. Scaling down and adding more native shrubs and trees.
Okay, thank you. Amy, do you have a summary for us, please?
Sure. Because I mean, it's a large change in a better way in terms of conservation. It's less. There's less going on within our jurisdiction, which, just to remind the board, this is the only resource area here is flood zone that we have to worry about. So normally, I mean, I would have administratively approved something if there were just minor changes, but this is really a complete plan change, a very doable plan change, but I thought it was worthy of coming back to the board just so you can formally adopt this plan. Again, as Swavi said, this is a 18-hole mini golf course as opposed to a 18-hole mini golf course. And I would keep all the other conditions that we really had on it. I would just recommend that you make this the plan of record.
Okay, thank you, Amy. All right, comments from members of the commission, starting with John.
Yeah, I don't really have any comments. This seems all positive to me, so I would be in favor of it.
Okay, Jim.
No comments.
Okay, Mark.
No comments?
Carolyn? Carolyn, any comments? Okay.
No comments.
All right, thanks. Ernie?
My only question is, do you have any intention, do you think, in the future to expand this back to the original plan?
Well, this is, nobody can project the future. I mean, right now we have only what's in front of you. It's kind of, it's been, you know, a long road to get to where we are right now. And at this point in time, I can't think of anything else other than, you know, being excited to what's in front of us and you know, getting this project off the ground.
The reason I asked the question is, if you, well, let me sort of rephrase that for Amy. Under the original approval for this, do they have to build the full 36 holes, or can they go with the 18 now and eventually expand it? Saving them both the time of refiling and...
Yep. After tonight, or if you vote to approve this change in plan, if they decide they want to do in the future anything different, they're going to have to come back to you.
Understood. So if we leave it at the original plan, can they build the 18 and then 2 years from now do the additional 18?
Potentially, but I think the plan would be drastically different even at that point. If you were to build this 18 now and then to change it to the 218 holes, a lot of their landscaping, everything else would change anyways. So
would that be an amendment though? I'm trying to save time for them and us is what I'm doing.
Yeah. My recommendation to keep it clean is to approve what they're asking for now. I think if you were to not approve this now and just stick with the 218 hole course, we're going to have an issue internally with permit review for his building permits, other permits, et cetera. Things aren't going to match up, and there's going to be some issue, things permitting wise. One of the reasons I like to do these changes in plans is to make sure that no matter how big or small the change, that all the permitting departments, planning, Board of Health, building, we're all working off the same set of plans, and the contractors don't have multiple sets of plans spinning around on the site. So I know what you're saying, Ernie. I just think it's cleaner this way.
And just to add to what Amy just said, the purpose of this meeting right now is because Planning Board had asked us and Zoning Board of Appeals asked that we go back in front of you so we have consistent plans on hand with all three boards. So, you know, nobody had asked, you know, what's your future plan and this and that. You know, that's kind of like, you know, it goes to what's in front of you, and then further, you know, down the road, if something changes, obviously, respectfully, we're going to, you know, go through the you know, the permitting process. But right now, that's what we have in front of us.
Yeah, that's fine. All right, that's fine. Then I'm fine with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, Stan.
No comment.
Okay. Any comments from members of the audience? All right, seeing none, all those, we need a motion first. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the change in plan for 348 Route 28, map 21, parcel N1.
Okay, could I have a second, please?
I'll second it, Stan.
All right, seconded by Stan. All those in favor say aye. I'll start with a roll call with John.
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Mark? Mark, you're still muted. Well, I'll come back to him if he comes on. Carolyn?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
Myself, Brad Chase, aye. Mark, you on? Do you want to vote on this one?
Aye. I got
Okay.
lost.
That's all right. Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. Next, we have a request for an amended order of conditions for 177 Forest Street, map 31, parcel C2, SE 32-2247. It's a replacement of old hardscape and the installation of new hardscape. Do we have a representative here tonight for this project?
I don't see anybody on our board, Brad. I did, right before the meeting, I quickly checked my emails to see if anybody had a problem logging in, and I didn't see anything.
Okay.
I did, so I don't know what's going on. Maybe just let's continue this to the next, do you want to continue it to the next meeting, or do you want to put it till later in the meeting just to see?
Yeah, we can wait. We can come back to it just in case
Yeah.
Mr. Saffron comes on. So I think that's what we'll do for now. Just don't let me forget.
Yeah, I'll say let's do it before we get to like all the extensions and the certs.
Okay.
Well, actually, we don't. That doesn't leave us much time, but let's we'll see how we do.
Okay, that sounds fine.
I'll remind you.
All right. Okay, so next is a notice of intent for 46 Indian Trail, map 34, parcel K3-2. It's a proposal for a new dwelling with appurtenances. Do we have a representative here tonight for this project?
They've asked for a continuance, Mr. Chair, till November 4th.
Okay. Well, then I move that we continue the hearing for the notice of intent for 46 Indian Trail, map 34, parcel K3-2 until November 4th, 2020. Have a second, please.
Second.
All right, seconded by John. And then we'll go through a roll call. All those in favor say aye, starting with John.
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
Myself, Brad Chase, aye. Okay, that continuance is approved. Next, we have a notice of intent for 47 North Road, map 19, parcel S2. It's a proposal to install a sheet pile and a dead man to reinforce an existing timber bulkhead. Do we have someone here tonight, Amy, do you think?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, this is
How are you?
Tom Smith. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, this is Tom Smith, the owner. And I have hired structural engineers requested by you guys at the last meeting. And I'm not sure, did everybody get the letter from Lars in regards to his view on this?
It was both emailed and is in your Dropbox.
So does that mean everybody received it? Everybody get a chance to look at the letter?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I think everyone else has. If you want to just briefly summarize the status, that'd be good.
Okay, yeah, I think Lars could handle this for me. He's with us right now. Lars, do you want to present what you and I have talked about?
Sure, good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so Thomas Smith has hired us to basically provide structural engineering services or engineering services for review both of the existing conditions of the bulkhead wall, and then also to discuss or follow up with what he intends to do, basically provide a closeout letter at the end that everything has been installed in accordance with requirements. So the idea here is that the bulkhead is existing, and Thomas Smith is not intending to change any of the layout, any of the existing elements of the bulkhead. Not sure if you have all seen a picture of it, but it's a timber pile system on the outside, and then it has timber planks vertically with some whalers. It's all a timber system right now in place. And the wall has been, not undermined, but it has been slightly washed out behind the wall because sediment was able to seep through the gaps of the timber planks over time. And especially with tidal changes that, seems to be an issue, probably has been going on for some time. So the idea is to come from the land side only and put a vinyl sheet piling system. It's a corrugated sheet pile, similar to the more known steel sheet piles, but out of vinyl, directly behind the wall. And the intent here is they also lock together, and the intent is that the waters will be stopped from, seeping into the soils directly behind it, and also don't wash them out any further from Herring River. And then, since it's a corrugated system, the gaps between the existing wood wall and this new vinyl sheet pile wall will be filled with a gravel material that cannot be rinsed out of the gaps, if you will, of the wood wall. So far we have taken a look at images of the wall. We're intending to do a site visit in person to just verify what we've seen so far is indeed the case. But the wall looks like it's structurally fully intact. There's no leaning, there's no damages that would indicate any concern of the structure. So the intent is as described, basically work from the land side only and just mitigate this washing out situation of the soils behind it, and then fill back after the new vinyl sheet pile wall has been installed. So there are really no changes, if you will, structurally to the wall. We're basically just keeping what's there, and we're providing a liner, for the lack of a better term, on the inside that will retain the soils better over time. That's the intent of the project.
All right, thank you. Amy, any summary comments for us on this?
Sure. At the last meeting 2 weeks ago, we did tell Mr. Smith that the commission would, like him to hire an engineer, or at least that we needed an engineered plan, realizing that was a very short time in which to do so. But, Mr. Smith obviously wants to take care of this in a timely fashion. But however, we typically do not, or I don't think we have ever approved a plan for essentially a new, it is a bulkhead behind a bulkhead, but it is a new coastal engineered structure without a site plan prior to voting on it. So, and then I have a few questions on the letter. So again, the letter just came today. I know you were short on time, Mr. Smith and Mr. Jensen, but, expecting myself and the commission to be able to review and comment and potentially vote on something that we got a few hours before the meeting is not something the commission and typically does. You say that it's just putting vinyl sheeting behind the existing bulkhead system, but then you also say in your letter the proposed repair includes minor repairs, additions to the inside face of the timber wall. So we would like to know in the future more about that and what exactly needs to be done and how. Things like that. Basically, when we look at approving bulkheads, we want the construction protocol, a site plan that shows the bulkhead's going to be behind where it is, but maybe a cross section of what things are going to look like, etc. So unfortunately, and I know this, that Mr. Smith is concerned about safety, maybe we can guide them a little bit on how to make the structure a little bit safe in the meantime, but I cannot yet recommend approval.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
So where does that leave us, Amy? What
you need me to have a set of plans before we can, a meeting for the next meeting? Is that what you're talking about?
I thought we talked about it at the last meeting, but the commission can correct me if I'm wrong, but that we wanted a site plan. So I will let the rest of the commission speak to that. It was only my recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Amy. All right, so we'll go through comments and questions from the commissioners, starting with John.
Yeah, I don't have any real comments. I agree with Amy. We need a site plan.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's where we left it last week, that we needed a site plan to move forward. That sounds like the engineer still needs to get out there to do a site visit. If there's any safety concerns about someone getting in behind the wall, or whatever, I'm sure that could be mitigated with some, construction fencing of some kind. That's all.
Thanks, Jim. Mark?
No remarks.
Okay. Carolyn?
No, I agree with everything that was said.
All right. Ernie?
Yeah, Mr. Jensen, just one question. Based on your comments, should I assume that you haven't even seen the site yet?
Yeah, that's correct. I have not been at the site in person. I have reviewed existing site plans, satellite images, and photos of the site.
Yeah. All right. That's fine. Yeah, I couldn't approve it if he hasn't even seen it physically. Then I don't think that's appropriate. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Ernie. Stan?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with the other commissioners. To try to go ahead and approve this tonight would in effect leave an open-ended blank check for whoever's doing the work. I mean, there's nothing really here in front of us to say what we're actually approving.
Okay. Thanks, Stan. All right. So I guess that leads us towards a continuance. Would you like to continue until the next meeting, Mr. Smith, or the meeting after? What's your timing?
Yeah, I'd like to continue it till the next meeting, and if that, I'll speak with Lars tomorrow and discuss what his time frame is, and hopefully we can get this together by the next meeting and get you what you need to make the proper decision.
Okay.
And just so you know, and to be clear, we need any revised plan, any new material a week prior, which would be a week from today.
Yeah, I got that, Amy.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay, and if it doesn't work out that way, the meeting after that is not too far off as well. So hopefully it comes together quickly. Okay,
when is the next meeting?
Amy, what's the date?
November 4th.
Oh, the one after that?
Would be November 18th.
Okay.
Okay, so can we continue till the 4th, and if that needs to change after I discuss it with Lars, we can adjust from there?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That'll work out fine. Okay, well then I move that we continue the hearing for 47 North Road, map 19, parcel S2 until November 4th, 2020.
Second.
Seconded by Jim. I guess I'll ask if there's any additional questions or discussion before having a vote. Okay, seeing none, then we'll start a roll call with John. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Jim.
Aye.
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
Carolyn.
Aye.
Ernie.
Aye.
Stan.
Aye.
And myself, Brad Chase, aye. So the motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you. We'll see you hopefully on the 4th.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next we have a request for an extension permit and amended order of conditions for the Ayers Lane Homeowners Association and the Association Beach between Pine and Pilgrim Roads. And it's a extension request for 3 years with an amended order of conditions for maintenance activities. And I think we have a representative here tonight.
Yeah, Helene Monahan.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
So Brad, I was going to say, Helene has not seen the draft other conditions. I drafted the new orders based on our conversation at the last meeting, and they are in your Dropbox. And what it does, it reflects the practices that the Air Lane Association is doing. Instead of the conditions previously were really heavily loaded with conditions about machinery and things like that, and beach condition. And then it came to light that the association is just having somebody go out there with a rake and move some of the seaweed, but leave it on the beach. And so at the same time as requesting an extension, we thought it was a good idea to amend the order to really reflect what they're actually doing there, because it's far less invasive than what was actually originally permitted to begin with. So I did put that in your Dropbox, it was today. So if you, basically what it allows is the hand raking of the seaweed not to be piled on any native vegetation, and it has to be left on the beach, etc. I think that's what we talked about last time.
Yeah, and that's what we do.
Okay, sounds fairly straightforward. All right, let's just see if we have any comments from the commissioners. I hope folks got a chance to look at it. John, any thoughts or comments?
No thoughts. The amended conditions look fine.
Jim?
No comments. It looks good to me.
All right, Mark?
No comments.
Carolyn?
That's just fine with me.
Ernie?
I'm fine. So the original order of conditions that allowed for tracked vehicles to do this, those are no longer valid, is that right?
It is no longer valid, and that permit only allowed them to do that once per year, which pretty much everyone does it more often than anyways. This, Helene, I did say once per week. We didn't really talk about how frequently you have somebody do it. Not that I remembered anyways, but since you're just doing it by hand, I didn't think it would be a problem.
Yeah, and there are times that the 14-year-old kid doesn't do it at all. It's just occasionally when there's so much seaweed, there's no place for anybody to sit.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so that's what we do.
Okay.
All right, and Stan?
Well, just to confirm that comment, so is 1 week, once a week adequate?
Some weeks, yes, some weeks, no. Yeah, we could do it once a week, I guess.
I could also take that condition out if you thought it wasn't needed. The commission thought it wasn't needed. I could take that timing condition out, or you could say once a week, or if it's needed more frequently, you can call my office and I can check it.
I think it would be great if we could take that condition out, only then it would, with me, I wouldn't have to call you every time we have 4 days in a row.
Right.
As I said, there are a lot of times there is no raking at all, but there are some weeks when we have a storm that, the beach is covered and the kid is working pretty hard. But anyways, we'll do what you want us to do.
Commission, it doesn't really matter to me because, again, they're leaving the material on the beach, they're just moving it over. So the tide, things are going to get moved around anyways. So I can either leave the condition as it is, change it, or we can omit the frequency condition.
Well, to me, the importance was more that it went from machine to manual raking and leaving it on the beach and not on any of the vegetation I don't know that the frequency is that much of an issue from my perspective. And rather than having the potential for them to be violating their condition, rather than leaving it the way it is, because it sounds like they wouldn't be following the condition in all cases if we left it the way it is.
I have a question. Is the time of year, June to September, important? Can we eliminate that, or should we leave that?
The teenager, the 13, 14, 15-year-olds that does it is only July and August.
But that doesn't mean that sometime in the future you might have a retired man who would like to rake it in May and October. Does that make a difference to us, is my question. Amy?
I just thought you should, I mean, it's really up to you, but I wanted to give it, I said June to September to give them some leeway, and that way, you know, knowing it was mostly July and August, but if you got a really hot month of June, and you had a lot of codium, or September, that's why I put June to September, to at least give it a time frame. And I think that more than covers, so we could take out, if the commission wanted, let me know, we can take out the once per week and just leave, and we can leave the time of year, June through September.
I'm good with that.
Okay. Let's see, Stan, you're all set?
Yeah, but.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to say I support the concept of removing that condition on the timing. Any further comments from the audience? All right. If I could have a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the request for an extension permit with the amended order of conditions for the Air Lane Homeowners Association.
Okay, could I have a second, please?
I'll second.
All right, seconded by John. Okay, we'll do a roll call, and if favorable vote would be aye. Starting with John.
Aye.
Jim.
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
Carolyn.
Aye.
Ernie.
Aye.
Stan.
Aye.
And myself, Brad Chase, aye. Okay, you have a approved amended order of condition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before we get farther into other things, do you want to continue 177 Forest Street?
Sure.
And just keep in mind that you have highlighted November 4th as a potential date for having the public hearing about the Herring River bogs. Tonight, we're going to hopefully solidify your options and the wording there to put out, but maybe we want to continue for, if your plan is still to do that next month, then we might want to continue 177 Forest for a month out, so we can keep that other agenda light.
I think that's a good idea, and I was going to ask if we have a no-show, are we obliged to continue, or is it just a courtesy that we extend?
Without continuing to a date certain, he'd have to re-notify all his abutters and everything else. It's just kind of, it's not really our issue, but can be kind of a headache, so.
Yeah, it's a hardship. Okay, so November 17th is the one after the 4th?
November 18th.
Okay, well then I move that we continue the request for amended order of condition for 177 Forest Street until November 18th, 2020.
I'll
Second.
Okay, seconded by Carolyn, and we'll do a roll call. Those in favor say aye, starting with John.
Aye.
Jim.
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
Carolyn,
Aye.
Ernie,
Aye.
and Stan,
Aye.
and myself, Brad Chase, aye. So the motion carries unanimously. All right, Amy, I guess we're on to the certificates of compliance.
Yep. Do you want me to go through them, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, please.
So the first is for William Kroll, Bellbrook Lane, map 23, parcel XA. Work had never started on this. This lot is now 12 Bellbrook Lane. The permit was to build a house in 1983. The work never happened, and the lot remains vacant and wooded. I would recommend a certificate of compliance for work not done to close this permit out.
Okay, do you want us to vote individually?
Yeah, because we do have, for the next couple, we have people on the line to chat about them.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to move that we approve the certificate of compliance for Dalbrook Lane. Could I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Okay, Carolyn seconded. And any discussion?
So Amy, we'd approved this to build a house. By approving this, we basically are canceling out this approval?
Correct. I mean, it's expired anyways by 35 years, but
Yeah, no, I understand that. But yeah, I just want to make sure. All right, thank you.
All right. If no further comments, then we'll have a roll call on approval. Those in favor say aye, starting with John.
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Mark?
Abstain.
Okay. Carolyn?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
And Stan?
Aye.
And myself, Brad Chase, aye. So we have 6 ayes and 1 abstaining. Okay, the motion carries. All right, Amy?
thank you. The next, and I believe somebody's on the line, is, in case you have questions, is for Ruth Ann and David Schatz at 10 Springtide Lane. We forgot to put the parcel in there, but that's okay. 10 Springtide Lane. So this was a path creation, birdhouse moving, and vista pruning project a couple of years ago. I did an inspection the other day. The homeowners were present. The path was created appropriately. And the vista pruning, if you can tell, sorry, the photo's a little dark. There's basically 2 small view corridors on either side of that large tree. Again, from the photo, you can tell the work was fairly minor. The plants have been in for a few growing seasons that they did replant by the birdhouse and are doing well. I would recommend a certificate of compliance with ongoing conditions that allow them to maintain the view as you see it. And of course, no fertilizer condition. Back then, we didn't have a no chemical, like a blanket condition. We just said no fertilizers. And they would to be able to mow the path as needed to maintain it. I would also recommend you let them keep the temporary drip irrigation for another year, especially after the year that we just had. And then we can evaluate that next year to see if the situation has gotten any better. But they did take some care to have those plants planted. They're still surviving and just want to give them a good chance. So I would recommend a sort of compliance with those conditions. And I believe the owner is also on the line if you have any questions for them.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I guess we'll go through all the commissioners and see if there are any questions or comments, starting with John.
No.
Okay, Jim.
No comments.
All right, Mark.
No questions.
All right, Carolyn.
Nope, I'm good.
Ernie.
I'm fine with this, thank you.
Yep. Ann.
And I'm fine as well, thank you.
Okay, and I don't have any additional comments either, so thank you, Amy, for the description. And so I think we can have a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the request for certificate of compliance for 10 Springtide Lane.
Okay, can I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Ernie. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor say aye, starting with John.
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
And myself, Brad Chase, aye. So the motion carries unanimously. All right, well, thank you. You're all set with the assert.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Amy, next up.
Next is John and Leslie Hardy, 26 Walker Woods Drive, map 94, parcel A5-7. It was for the installation and maintenance of a seasonal dock, vista pruning, and outdoor kitchen. So I put both the approved plans and what was actually built, the as-built, in your Dropbox for you. So the dock, it was built as per the plans and is stored accordingly in the off-season on the decking. The outdoor kitchen was never built. The approved plan, let's see, only a little bit of fencing is now in the 100-foot buffer. As you will, if you compare the two plans, really pretty much the closest disturbance or structure to the wetland is kind of straddling that 100-foot buffer zone line. There is kind of the, Mr. Hardy did have some shrubs planted on the seaward, if you will, side of the fence. And I think that they should do well. And it's there's kind of a bare area where the kitchen, part of the work should have been that was permitted. And I just recommended seeding that with a native mix, such as wildflowers or native grass. It's a strip. Other than that, everything, the whole slope is very well vegetated. They're doing their pruning as per the plan, and I would recommend approval of sort of compliance with the ongoing condition on dock storage.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
And Mr. Hardy is on the line if you have any questions for him.
Okay. All right, so let's go through comments and questions, starting with John.
No comments, no questions.
All right, Jim.
No, I don't have anything.
Mark?
No remarks.
Okay, Carolyn?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Ernie? Yep.
Yeah, question, Amy, how will this COC impact the outdoor kitchen that wasn't built?
Well, it closes the whole permit out. So if they wanted to build the outdoor kitchen, they would have, in the future, they would have to come back to the Conservation Commission.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, good question, Ernie. Stan?
No comment.
Okay. All right, any additional comments or members of the audience? All right, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll move we approve the certificate of compliance for 26 Walker Woods Drive, map 94, parcel A5-7.
Okay, could I have a second, please?
I'll second.
All right, seconded by Carolyn. So we'll do a roll call, and all those in favor stating aye, starting with John.
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
And myself, Brad Chase, aye. So the motion carries unanimously. You're all set. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So we got through things fairly quickly. Oh, no, there's one more, I guess, for certs.
Yeah, we're gonna have to table this because it's a cert and it's not a hearing. You don't need to continue it to a date certain. It's
Okay.
once we get the information needed, we'll put it on the next agenda we can. But just to announce it, Joe and Lorinda Raquel, 40 Bob White Lane, map 17, parcel R4. It was for the demo and rebuild of a dwelling. We do require a certified as-built plan. This one in particular went through an approval plus 2 amendments. There were various site plans. When I went out to the site, things didn't quite appear to match. So I said, well, we really need that as-built site plan. Sometimes if things are exactly how they were permitted and it's very clear, I might recommend you move on it, but this one I can't. So you don't need to continue until a date certain. I had put November 18th on here, but we are not ready for that one yet.
Okay, well, thank you for announcing it too. Okay, well, we've gotten to the discussion fairly quickly.
That's good.
Yeah, do you have any small items you want to take up now, Amy, or do you just want to get into the float regulations?
It's up to you. We do have a set of minutes if you wanted to quickly do those. I know, but we can also do them next meeting. Melissa has been, scrambling, and we've been very busy. So they only made it into your Dropbox today. So if you want to do those now, we can, if you feel you're ready, or we can do them later in the meeting or next meeting.
Well, I would say, maybe we can, come back to them this meeting. People can scan them as they're able to. That's something I'd like to do, and so we can circle back to them, or we can take care of next meeting. So,
okay.
All right. Well, you've got the draft.
Just a reminder, next meeting will be the hearing, so you might not want to be adding that to that meeting, but anyway.
Yeah.
No, we'll come back and take care of it tonight then, Stan. That's a good idea. All right. Well, Amy, if you want to describe what you have for the flotation regulations.
Yep. So what I did for you, because we also are talking about docks and piers, I took the latest draft that we had, which was from 2019, draft regs, and I just added to those. I figured we could add the flotation regulations as well as kind of pick up where we left off in regards to docks and piers. And just so the commission knows, we only have flotation regulations and dock and pier regulations on our agenda. So we technically can't talk about other sections of the regulations. We can certainly put that on for next time, but we're really stuck to the draft float regulations and in general, the dock and pier regs. So I'm just opening the document now. I did send this to the woman who had expressed concern about this, about what's happening on Great Sand Lakes, and she is in agreement with my latest edit on it. Brad and I talked a little bit about today, so again, I'm talking about just the flotation regulations. And it's slowly loading on my computer. And I put it both under the saltwater and freshwater dock and pier regs, I thought, just to be thorough. So for example, I'm under, sorry. Computer is being difficult. So the language should be in red now. My suggestion, and I'm open to other suggestions, flotation on floats is to be made of non-biodegradable material. Styrofoam or similar is prohibited. Type of flotation is to be noted on the proposed plan and approved by the Conservation Commission. If flotation is in need of replacement, the type of flotation shall not be biodegradable and shall be approved by the commission or its agent. So that piece comes into pre-existing docks and piers and floats where things are deteriorating, they have to replace new. That's where that would come into play. So, but I'm open to suggestion. I did, like I said, I shared this with Anne, and she liked it. Gave me a couple suggestions, which I incorporated.
All right, thanks, Amy. How do folks feel about the language? I guess I'll switch things up and start with you, Stan. You're still muted, Stan.
Sorry, I was reading this. Yeah, I read it earlier, and I don't really have any major comments. I can go along with this.
All right, thanks. Bernie?
Yeah, the only comment I'd have is at the end of it, you say if flotation is in need of replacement. I guess I would have worded that more along the lines of if flotation to existing floats is in need of replacement. Type of replacement flotation shall not be biodegradable, shall be approved by the commission or agent.
Sorry, if flotation to existing floats is in need of replacement.
Yeah, the replacement flotation shall not be biodegradable.
Yeah. Got it. I like that. So I'm making changes as we go. So if you just refresh, you should be able to see the changes that I make.
Okay, Carolyn, any comments? Okay. Mark?
No remarks?
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, and John?
Yeah, it seems fine to me. I'm just curious how prevalent the styrofoam flotation is in Harwich saltwater application. I know in Chatham, where I keep my boats, this idea of a mooring dock is pretty widespread. That is, instead of a single boat on a mooring, there's a float with two boats on it. And I was looking around the other day and they were all styrofoam. At least all the ones I looked at were. And I'm just wondering if that's the case in Harwich as well. I don't imagine that the reconstruction in Saquatucket, that hopefully was not styrofoam, right?
No. To my knowledge, from what I've seen, well, I don't know about the fingers, but I can double check. I don't believe so.
And do you know, does anybody know whether styrofoam is more susceptible to degradation in saltwater than freshwater or the other way around?
I don't know. That would be interesting to look up. This use of styrofoam is more prevalent in our freshwater ponds where we may not have docks, but you actually have floats which are technically supposed to have a mooring permit. So floats that are mostly swim floats that are not associated with a dock structure, are just floats in the middle of the pond. That's where we see it a lot.
And I guess in the marine application, usually the sorts of things I was talking about are maintained professionally typically and would be perhaps less of a concern, but does it make any sense to add language to these things that specifically requires owners of floats where the styrofoam is observed to be disintegrating to repair them? Can we impose a restriction like that?
I think this regulation makes it so as if we were to get a complaint, as we did for like the one we did on Great Sand Lakes, this regulation gives us the ability to approach that person and say, hey, we noticed your float is degrading. We have this regulation that requires it to not be styrofoam, and it needs to be replaced because it is degrading.
Really? I don't see where that,
I like your comment though, John, and I'm thinking that maybe we could even say that if the flotation is degrading or otherwise in need of replacement, maybe that would address what you're thinking about.
Yeah, well, I think the person who brought this to our attention last time was very concerned about things that were falling apart. And it's not clear to me that this language directly addresses that, that's all.
So how about if flotation to existing floats is determined to be in need of replacement, either by the owner and or the commission agent?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Can we require, I think we want to get the ability to require the owner of a degrading flotation to replace it.
That's what I'm doing. That's
So
what
I
we're
think we
doing.
need strong language there.
I'm just changing it now.
Yeah, I know, but I think it needs to read exactly.
If flotation to existing floats is determined to be in need of replacement by either the owner and or the conservation agent, the replacement flotation shall not be biodegradable. And actually that's redundant after that. And it says, and shall be approved by the commission or its agent, but that's redundant, that last piece. Flotation to existing floats determined to be in need of
Permission to say to someone, you've got to replace it.
if flotation to existing floats is determined to be in need of replacement by either the owner and or the conservation agent, the replacement flotation shall not be biodegradable.
The commission has the authority to direct replacement with a non-biodegradable. It's got to be determined that it's deteriorating, and it's got to be determined that we have the power to say you have to replace it.
I know what you're saying. I'm trying to make it so it's not so wordy on my screen here. Hold on a second. All right, I don't know if I love this, but I'm gonna run it by you. If flotation to existing floats is determined to be in need of replacement by either the owner and or the conservation agent, the replacement flotation shall conform to this regulation, and the flotation is to be replaced by something non-biodegradable.
Bingo.
Something like that. So I'm just changing it to one of the sections now. I don't know if I'm working in Salt or Fresh because my computer, when I try to scroll to the next page, brings me 5 pages up. So whatever changes I make to this tonight, I'll make to the other section that it's in because it's under both Fresh and Salt, just so you know. Don't think I'm missing it. I think I'm working in salt water. That's what it looks like right now. I should say this also applies to swim floats, actually, because it makes it sound like this is all docks. Got it.
Amy, as we talked about before, it's not just swim floats and docks either. There's other styrofoam in the ponds as well.
So this applies to all water-dependent structures requiring flotation.
Yeah.
Anything else for that?
No, but I have a comment on the next section that's not in red. And this actually probably could be discussed since it relates to the previous air lane request for cleaning on the beach.
Wait, what next section? If we're not talking about floats or docks and piers, we can't talk about it tonight.
The next section is beach cleaning regulations, and we did discuss beach cleaning regulations for air lane.
Yeah, but it's not a separate topic for discussion of regulations. We discussed beach cleaning because it was a request for an extension for a specific property. It wasn't, we didn't say we were talking about the regulations or making, I should have made it more broad and just said review of, well, actually you can't. You're supposed to keep it very direct about what you're talking about in the agenda.
But according to these regulations, we made a mistake in our decision on their orders of condition, which asks for frequency.
I think you determined in this specific instance that because of the means that they do it, that you can allow variances, which you essentially did.
And I don't think anybody's going to worry about it.
Yeah. But thank you.
Just something to remember.
Yes.
Moving on.
Okay, so to put this in context, Amy, we're going to review all the changes, and do you anticipate we'll move anything forward today, or we'll just, discuss them?
It's up to you. Every time we make a change to the regulations, it's like a new revised date, a new posting, new set of regulations. So, I mean, if we think we're close, I mean, I would recommend that we kind of do multiple changes at once. So I don't have to, every couple weeks change over our set of regulations.
Right. Well, I think we're good to go on the flotation piece.
Okay, good.
But the next piece, I think, I almost picture us wanting to get back together with Waterways and maybe Department of Natural Resources and the Harbor Master.
Yeah.
And because we had the meeting, I think it was January of last year, and then we got busy with other things and we've kind of put it aside. So,
yeah,
I guess everyone can chime in how they feel about that, but I would like to make some progress with discussing dock and pier changes. I don't know if it's appropriate.
Yeah.
To make any changes tonight.
I don't know. I mean, I do want to see this personally, this regulation for flotation go through fairly quickly. I think so if you think it's going to be, 6 months to a year out for the dock and pier regs, I would recommend that you do vote to approve the flotation changes tonight.
Yep.
But if you think it's just going to be a month or two out for the dock and pier, then I would say hold off and we can deal with things case by case until then. But if you think it potentially could be a while, I would just vote the float regulations.
Yeah, well, I think we should definitely vote on the float regulations now, and I guess we'll see how people feel about the other regs. My thought is that we almost would need to air the other regs with either a public hearing or with a a meeting with the other departments. Is that your understanding, or could we just move ahead if we wanted to?
You could, but it doesn't look good. It doesn't sit well with others.
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree. Well, why don't I make a motion that we approve the regulation changes for flotation devices, just standalone, and then we can move on to the dock and piers after that.
Yeah, I'd second that, Brad.
Okay. All right. So we have a second. Any discussion on that? Okay. Well, let's vote on it with a roll call with a positive vote as A, starting with John.
Aye.
Jim.
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
Carolyn.
Aye.
Ernie.
Aye.
Stan.
Aye.
Myself, Brad Chase, aye. Okay,
And
so that
so
means,
who moved and seconded on that?
I think, did you second it, Ernie? I thought you did.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Brad, you moved?
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry. Trying to multitask. It's not working.
You do it well.
Not today, I don't. But thanks.
All right, so I
So
guess,
we'll get that moving along.
Hey, Amy, let me just ask you a very quick clarification question. I'm looking at the following provision in there. And the way you worded that was flotation on floats and swim platforms, right?
I said any water-dependent structure.
Well,
Or
I'm just
fire.
looking at the next, item 6 talks about all structures except floats shall be supported by pilings. So I just want to make sure you get your terminology right on this one as far as what's a swim platform versus a float and all that kind of stuff.
Maybe we should, let's look at our definition real quick of float.
Yeah.
So our definition of float for saltwater is a floating structure anchored in position by pilings, chain, or otherwise, which is designed to rise and fall with the tide, used in conjunction.
Fine. Okay. I think you covered it then.
But then for fresh water, it's a good point. For fresh water, I think we need to add a definition for float, for fresh water.
Amy,
All right. I'm comfortable with you. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Amy, can we include that to cover saltwater also? I know in Richmere Harbor there is a swim platform out in the middle of the harbor.
For saltwater, hold on 1 second. Just give me 1 second I have to put like a bolt, remind myself to do a definition for float for fresh water, which will encompass a lot of things. And then float for salt is what I had said. Yeah, so it would just say, you could have a float in salt water. So right now it reads again, a floating structure anchored in position by pilings, chain, or otherwise, which is designed to rise and fall with the tide, used in conjunction with a wharf, pier, or dock to moor and give access to a vessel. But that's not the only thing they're being used for, as you're saying.
No, it's ending.
I almost wonder if you take out that last part. You only say a floating structure anchored in position by pilings, chain, or otherwise, which is designed to rise and fall with the tide, period.
Period. Good.
But how does everybody else feel about that? Because that takes out used in conjunction with a wharf, pier, or dock to moor and give access to a vessel.
I don't think that's necessary.
How does everybody else feel about that if I were to remove that last part of the sentence? What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a strong feeling either way on that.
Because, I mean, yeah, a float doesn't have to be used in conjunction with a wharf, pier, or dock.
Or boat.
Yeah, boat, pier. This is very clearly boat orientated. All right, I took it off and it now just says float. It's a floating structure anchored in position by pilings, chain, or otherwise, which is designed to rise and fall with the tide.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's good. Do we need to revote?
Oh, I think so. Technically, you made changes.
Yeah, I thought so.
Trying
All
to
right.
have you not have to do that.
That's okay. We'll do it quickly. So I move that we approve the just mentioned changes to the flotation regulations.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Ernie. And so we'll go through roll call to approve with an aye. John?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Stan?
Aye.
And myself, Brad Chase, aye. So that motion carries again. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm
So-
just going to take 2 minutes, but you guys, you can keep going. I just need 2 minutes.
Okay, that sounds fine. Anyone else want a break? Okay. So we met, I think it was January 16th of this year, with Waterways and other town staff to discuss dock and pier regs. And there was a lot of interest, I think, to change things. And one of the big interests, I think, from some folks with Waterways was to make it easier to dredge certain types of locations, certain habitats. And whereas I think the Conservation Commission's interest was really to tighten up our regulations to, better review, approve, or deny projects. So I really would like to get back to it and move something forward. But again, I think we do need to have a joint discussion at some point with the other groups. Do folks agree with that? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think so. But I also want to, make this something that we can really make some progress on and not have it go too far. So,
Hey, Brad, in that discussion, was there any comments about our concerns from the other groups?
yeah, there was some of that. I think there was a real strong interest to make it possible to dredge areas that people felt were degraded, in particular, Witchmere Harbor, Allen's Harbor. And our regulations which say that you must have a certain depth for your flotation in order to permit a dock, kind of makes things hard for that goal of theirs, because if you can't achieve the depth without dredging, we often are trying to protect the habitat that would be dredged. So they had that interest. They I guess they didn't want to see things become more difficult for docks and piers. But, it really, that's not our purview. We have a very different role in town. And, we're here to administer the environmental regulations, both state and local bylaws. So I didn't have a big problem that we didn't see things exactly the same, because we have different roles. Is that consistent with what folks remember of the meeting?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, we're just chatting up the last time we met on January 19th, Amy.
I
January
heard you.
6th. Oh, good. And
I wasn't far.
yeah, I just want to set the plate so we can have a good discussion tonight, and then maybe move towards firming up our regulations. I think, for me, a couple things I think we can find some quick agreement on, and then some things I think we'll have to discuss it further. And one of the big issues I have is an increase in the setback to adjacent structures. Right now we have 65 feet, and we've thrown out a couple options.
Yeah.
And then similar to that is the whole concept. I mean, for myself, I'm seeking for better protection of some of these aquatic resources that I think are impacted by docks, piers, and boat activity. And something that Ernie brought up recently was the idea of protecting sensitive parts of town by just having, you know, a moratorium on docks and piers like was done in Pleasant Bay years ago. So that's kind of related to the setback, because I think the setback is trying to achieve the same type of thing to reduce impacts. But if you can't achieve that, maybe we should also discuss having a moratorium in some locations. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. So do you want to discuss, Amy, the changes that you've made so far? And I guess we can then comment from there.
I actually really haven't made any more changes other than what we talked about for flotation tonight. And then what was kind of discussed back the last time we talked about it. Sorry, I didn't have a chance to.
No, that's fine. So I'm working with the Chapter 310, or Chapter 304, actually, water dependent structures, where you made changes in red, or potential changes in red.
Yeah.
And then I also am working on a document that I sent out with my recommendations from January 10th, 2019, I guess. Okay. Huh. I thought it was 2020, but maybe it was 2019. So
It's been a while. I mean, we haven't talked about this since well before COVID hit. So it could have been late 2019.
Yeah, I guess it was 2019. So I guess what I would like to do is kind of revisit my recommendations and then, you know, hear what everyone else is thinking, and then get something that we can put together and maybe vote on. Certainly not the next meeting, but maybe it's something we could do in December.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and so that's kind of my thought, is that I'm pretty close to what I think I would support, but I'd like to look at it closely. And I think that John brought up some really interesting points on shellfish surveys, and so I think we do need to do more work on really defining what the surveys should do, and that could be part of this as well. So I'll run through the recommendations I made on just the key items last time quickly, and then I think I'll turn over to other folks to see what they have to say. But I would suggest to increase the setback to adjacent structures from 65 to 150 feet. Pleasant Bay has a 250-foot setback, and so Amy put down, I think, 150, 200, 250. So those setbacks are there. Again, my interest is to reduce what I see as impacts that occur to coastal bank, salt marsh, and shellfish habitat from scouring activities as well as boat activities, and then the actual structural, the construction of the components of these as well. So that's a big one for me, is to try to reduce impacts by increasing our setback. Number two, increasing the spacing of deck planks. And I like the language that Amy has. I think that one's fairly easy to support. Number three, improve the language on shellfish surveys. And I think we can look at some of John's thoughts, and we can work on that as time goes on. And we want to improve off-season storage, the language, to make it very clear that there'll be penalties if people put these things on resources. I thought at the previous meeting, the next item is the water depth at float at mean low water. I thought there was decent agreement to increase from 2.5 to 3 feet. And so
Yes.
I support that. The towns of Dennis and Yarmouth have that already. And so that's fairly consistent with some nearby towns.
I would say, and just make it clear that it's not to be achieved by improvement dredging.
Yes, that's a very good point. So those are the big ones that I have, and I will roll up my sleeves on the shellfish survey piece. And then I would say the one new one that we haven't talked about too much is having just a moratorium on sensitive areas. And for me, the sensitive areas really are the lower Herring River. I just feel that river is really stressed. I think it's at risk, and it isn't just docks, obviously, but I think it's cumulative effects by just higher human density and higher boating activity in recent decades are degrading resources in that river. So I think it's something we should discuss. It obviously would bring a lot of comments out, I think. But I think that should be discussed alongside of the setback because they both seek to do something similar. So that's what I have. I think I would like to resubmit my comments from before and get it in Dropbox so that people can look at it. And so that'll be done very soon. And I guess why don't we just go through comments from the commissioners and see where people are at. Stan, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm interested, you mentioned the shellfish part. I didn't copy you, Brad. Amy did, and I responded to John with some regarding his memo. I think there's two concerns. One is, we're always on the issue of what should the density of shellfish be in terms of is there or isn't there. So, and the more I've been thinking about this is I think the question really becomes, are there shellfish in the area or none, period? Because the way we're doing these surveys right now, we're not really, we don't have a quantification level that we're trying to either say is yes or no. And the other comment that we've discussed in some of the other projects is the randomness of these surveys. There's really no set parameters on to make these surveys apples to apples. So I think that's one comment. Amy just touched on the other one that I was just thinking of was regarding to the potential with dredging issues. So I won't bring that up. But there's one other thing I've thought about when I'm going up and down the river. If we're looking at a spot on the river that has serious erosion problems to begin with, and somebody wants to put a dock in that area, I don't know how to, I'm not sure what I'm trying to say here, but it's very vulnerable, and putting a dock in that area just makes the issue worse. And I don't know how we can control that or include that in these regs.
It's hard to, make regs that are for exact specific situations like that. But what I could say is when you evaluate those proposals, if it's at a tough place in the river where you have, active erosion already happening, if the proposal is going to have an increased negative impact on the stability of a coastal bank or its ability to perform its coastal bank functions, that would be a grounds for not approving the project potentially.
Right, because what I'm talking about, right, is putting one right in an area where there is erosion going on already.
Yeah, so they have to prove that it's not going to have a negative impact on those performance standards.
Right. Okay, so I guess those are my three thoughts, Brad.
All right, thanks, Dan. It is something to keep an eye on. I think the erosion issue is important. I think we have been focused on salt marsh and shellfish, whereas I think coastal bank impacts are very real, and they're going to continue. You know, the sea level's coming up, so it's not going to go away. So, all right, thank you, Stan. Ernie?
Yeah, let me start by saying, John, I read your analysis. I thought it was fabulous, very, very insightful, and I really appreciated your taking the time to do that. And based on what Stan was saying, and in conjunction with the critique, if you call it that John's paper does of the surveys that we presently see, I mean, it almost sounds to me like right now we look for the presence of shellfish. And I mean, it seems we could address this by, in a lot of the issues on the Herring River, by just saying we won't allow docks where shellfish are present, period. I mean, that takes care of the surveys right there if they come up with any evidence of shellfish. And it would also probably shut down any new docks on most of the Herring River, if not all of it. So that might be one way that we could deal with it without using that dreaded word moratorium that I think would garner a lot of negative comments from people. It's hard to argue with something that's more based on natural resources as opposed to just doing a blanket moratorium that people could challenge, I think. The other thing I liked that you mentioned, Brad, was the 3-foot depth at the end, but more importantly, that it can't be improved by dredging. You know, one of the last applications that we had, one of my big concerns is they go ahead and dredge, and if you're on a river, you go ahead and dredge, and then within a number of years, that depth is gone. You know, the flow of the river will probably fill in any dredging that's there. And I don't think we can rely on the property owners to go back out and spend more money to have it re-dredged. They'd probably just use it with whatever depth is there at the time. So I think that allowing for the depths to be based on natural water levels is much better than allowing any dredging to take place on a place like the river that's so changing and so unstable for that kind of activity. So yeah, I think a lot of what you've mentioned here, we could work into a proposal. You know, you mentioned sensitive areas being the Herring River, and I would get Winchmere Harbor is also there as well, which causes some issues as far as dredging. But if we limit it to, you know, just making sure that that it only applies to dock depths, then they could go dredge elsewhere if they needed to for channels and that kind of thing. So I'm pretty much in favor. Yeah, sorry.
There are some people in Winchmere who have permits that allow for dredging around their floats. So you can't really go back and change that if they have it, right. I just want to make sure you understand.
Yeah, no, this is all forward looking.
Yeah.
So yeah, I understand that. What's happened has happened, and
right.
You know, it's hard for us to change that. So I like the direction that you're proposing on this, and I think that could make a big impact on what we're trying to do without actually doing a full moratorium on it. That's it, Brad.
All right, thanks, Ernie. Okay. Carolyn?
Well, I think our responsibility regarding shellfish beds is to protect viable shellfish beds. And I sometimes wonder whether we increase the probability of a healthy aquatic environment by dredging sometimes. And I am against saying there's 2 shellfish in this area of muck. You can't eat them. You can't, the toxins are too strong, but therefore you can't put in a dock either. And I think sometimes the dredging cleans up the black mayonnaise that is not so good. The state regulation that we can give a variance if we can return the bed to its previous condition within a year gives me pause. It makes me very nervous denying a dock with that state regulation there. I realize towns can do their own regulations, but we still get sued and reviewed and all that. And so a better description of what is a significant shellfish bed is absolutely necessary. But another question I've had is, what do we do if our commission respectfully disagrees with a professional survey? We had this in one instance regarding a dock. And I think we need to have some guidelines as to what to do. Our regs require them to do a survey. They do a survey, it comes back, and we say, well, we don't believe your survey. I think
it leads to a denial, and we have to defend, why we don't believe that. And then it goes through its course in the court process. And we may need to provide evidence. That means we may need to hire our own person. Excuse me. To refute that. I mean, you always have the opportunity to, if you don't believe their survey, to hire somebody either on their dime or yours to recreate what they did, redo the survey as they did it and see what they find.
Well, it seems to be on our dime, but this is we don't have to get into the specifics on this too far now, but that is something that I think it would be helpful for future commissions to have guidelines as to what to do in that case.
Can I add a comment, Carolyn, on that?
Sure.
Because, and this is what I replied to John, until this last discussion on surveys, I really didn't understand what the survey was telling me. I didn't really appreciate what the mechanics were of what they were actually measuring. So I think part of discussion on surveys is make sure we understand what the calculation is really telling us. And I'm talking me personally, because on a couple of the previous ones, I guess this was probably about the third one that I was involved in since I've been on the board, I really didn't really understand what the survey was telling me in terms of how many shellfish were in that area. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an important part of it. And then, like I said, in other discussions, is they have to have a strict standard of how to compare one survey to another. They're too random right now in terms of seasonality when they're done, timing of potential fishing and shellfishing in the area. And I won't say any more at this point, but this is my personal issue, what I've been thinking about myself.
I agree with all that. Those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, no, it's a good point, Stan. I think that we have had surveys that have shown a pretty high density of shellfish, and it depends on how you look at it. You can say there's 29 clams were found, and that's not very many, but on a percentage basis, it can be a pretty high coverage. Then you consider John's calculations, and you can see that the standing population is a large amount of shellfish. So I think we can do a lot, but I went back and I looked at other towns again, discussion, and it's all over the map what other towns are doing. And very few towns are putting down a density threshold. The closest I found was the town of Falmouth had a very conservative threshold of 1 clam per square yard, I think it was. So if you find anything, they're having concerns. But I think we can do better. I think we can put a range, and I think we should all work on that.
I think, so what kind of came to light or, clarity a little bit in the past couple meetings for these surveys is, they're counting plots that they're surveying, but just really visually surveying that are in the marsh. They're not digging in there, they're just visually seeing what's there. So of course, if your half of your plots are in that area and you're including that, 50 plots are in the salt marsh, but you're not really sampling, and your total number of plots is 100, well, you're technically, in my mind, potentially only really sampling what's below the tide line, below the salt marsh. And when you include what's above that, because they don't find anything, it dilutes your findings, your percentages. It makes it look, in my potentially artificially lower percentage-wise than what it is. So I think maybe if we're gonna still have them do shellfish surveys, we need to be clear about, do we want them to even sample or look in the salt marsh, or should the grid be all past salt marsh and in tide areas where, you don't have marsh, you just have sediment. Of course, you're going to sample there, but because we don't want you digging the salt marsh up. But I think that plays into it too, because often they say, well, we only found, the percentage of shellfish was only 4% out of these 100 plots. Well, would have been double that because you sampled in the salt marsh. So I think we just need, if we're going to use surveys at all, anymore, I think we just need to clarify what is the survey area.
Yeah, good point. I think we spell out what kind of survey that we want and be clear. That's one concern, the diluting of samples, and then we've had 2 of the last 4 surveys that omitted soft shell clams.
Right.
And I had great concerns with that. And and we've had really just 2 or 3 different surveyors, but they had very different techniques. One had low sample sizes. AECOM has high sample sizes. None of them are random. I talked to one fellow who he hasn't done Harwich surveys, but he works in Falmouth, Yarmouth, Dennis, and he does random samples. And he's really trying to focus on random samples in habitat that should have shellfish or could have shellfish. And he's a lifelong clam digger, and he says he's not going to miss soft shell clams. He says it doesn't happen. So there's very different approaches, and I think we just tell people how we want them done.
Brad, when you said he random samples, does he do statistically valid random samples? Yes,
he generates random numbers. When I do surveys for my work, and I'm looking at habitat types, whether it's eelgrass bed, we always generate random numbers and then apply them to transects so that we have truly random samples. And my training is that's what you have to do if you want to do analyses, using statistics later on. And so that one survey does that. The ones that we have dealt with, they do not. They have fixed stations. So that's something that I want to talk further with John about to see if it's a better approach. I think when Pam at AECOM does so many individual stations, it probably doesn't matter that she's not randomizing because she has so many individual samples. But if we want to adopt some further analyses like John's suggesting, then we may have to consider if it should be random samples. So it's definitely something to consider. If you don't have random, is there also a potential for bias? I've been around for a while. Some of the early surveys that I dealt with on the commission were really not good at all, and I felt they were biased, or some of them were biased. So that's a concern. But if we tell people how they should be done, and if they do have to be random, then things are going to be very, clearly spelled out as to how they should be done. Okay, Mark, any comments on this topic?
Just very simply, the specifics that you were just talking about to me would be very important for the sake of understanding. This whole issue to me is very problematic because you've got a situation where things change all the time, and it's not clear to me how to come to grips with that and still show projections where you have a naturally changing occurrence. So I'm really quite puzzled.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Mark. And John Randone brought something up similar way. You know, I feel very strongly that I've seen impacts from docks and piers, and he asked me how can I separate those impacts from other natural processes such as climate change and sea level rise, and it's a really valid point. And there's no amount of studies that really will allow us, I think, to pin down some of these impacts because there's so many competing covariates occurring that can influence the abundance of shellfish and other, you know, aquatic life. So it's tough, but I think, you know, we have to decide, I guess, among ourselves if we feel that there are impacts. And I think we can, you know, modify our regs to try to minimize impacts and then modify the rules for surveys to try to get the best information that we can. So I think that's a good starting point for folks, I think, is, you know, how do you feel about that? Do you think docks are causing impacts? You know, we've heard a lot from paid consultants that they do not. And then you've heard a lot from me that says that I feel they do. So it's kind of a key decision point, I think, for everybody to see how they feel and then compare that to the language of our regulations. I'm very concerned about cumulative impacts in places like between the bridges and Herring River. And it's not just docks and piers. It's just human activity. It's septic systems. It's boating. It's all those things together. And docks just add more boats, more human activity. So I think the cumulative impact issue has not been looked at. And maybe it's not fair to look at it because, you know, is it fair that a single proponent of it who wants a dock, I mean, is it really their burden to consider cumulative impacts? So, Mark, that was a good point. And any other thoughts on any of these specifics on setbacks or any of those type of things?
I'm struggling with the setbacks as well, Brad. I simply don't have an answer for that. And I'm very puzzled by it. I simply don't know what direction to go in with it.
Right. You know, one of the things I think I'm going to do is if I can, Amy, I think I'd like to load some photographs I have of docks and piers in Herring River that show impacts. It's hard to imagine, I think, you know, what can happen. And so maybe I'll do that. I'll redo my recommendations and I'll load some photographs. And if people want to go out and look at some of these places, I'd be happy to take people. Some of them, you know, it's a mucky approach to get to them, but others not as much.
But we can also talk to John Randone about, I mean, we can't probably all fit on the boat, but maybe we can make a couple trips, or a couple of us can go on the Harbor Master boat and you could drive us up the river. It's much easier to see things that way.
That'd be fantastic because you would get a sense of current and, you know, how the river meanders. And, you know, one property I think has a tremendous scouring impact and the next one might not have as much.
Yeah. Well, let me try to set something up. I mean, it's going to be highly weather dependent, but and maybe we have to do 2 trips because we can't fit everybody, or not everybody's schedule is going to match up. But let's try to, I mean, if the weather's still nice, let's go for a ride.
Yeah.
John's taken me before, so.
Yeah.
I'll see if he minds.
Yeah, if you take 2 boats, I can put mine in if you want too.
There you go.
Yeah, I could bring mine over as well. So, yeah, I think it's a good idea just to get out there and see it. And we've all talked about the off-season storage. I think we're coming around on that one together. But at the same time, you can look at the impacts that Stan has been talking about, and those impacts are pretty direct. And
hey, Brad, something you really made me aware of it. Not the storage, but the impact from the docks underneath, the loss of marsh grass. Because once you mentioned that at the beginning of this year, every time I'd go out there on the river, I could see the difference right under the pier where the grass is really either thin or dead and gone away. I mean, there's like a path right under the pier. So along with that goes along the things, height, like we've talked about, the spacing on the dock, and then the height of the dock as well, I think is lessening the impact. And I don't want to praise it too much, but the one that I saw that didn't really seem to really be damaging the marsh grass was the monopile pier versus the standard design of a pier or dock.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been by there like 3 times. I don't have a great sense of how that one's looking, but no, it's a good point that we should all try to understand. And if you go to places like Wychmere, the harbor, where you don't have that tidal flow, the scouring impacts to salt marsh will be less. And so it's really case by case, site by site. And I think there's a lot of degradation between the bridges in Herring River from salt marsh scouring. And, and I look at our regs and say, well, we probably shouldn't allow that. Some of those are older docks that were down, 4 feet or closer. And so then you have real light penetration issues too. All right, Jim, I guess you're up.
Sure, yeah. I do see some impacts from the piers and docks, particularly cumulative impacts. And I think you do have to consider things cumulatively, because basically anything by itself doesn't create a big impact, no matter what you're talking about environmentally. But once it's repeated, it tends to. There's the scouring that's been mentioned. I think there's a pollution issue, basically from the additional boats that tend to be there. Another impact that hasn't really been discussed that to me is really a pretty big deal, particularly on Herring River, is the impacts to the actual ability to use the river, whether it's for shell fishing commercially or recreationally, whether for fin fishing recreationally, for navigation of small boats, kayaks, paddle boards, small sailing boats, smaller power boats, trying to stay out of the way of larger power boats. If we keep repeating what, like the pier that was approved a couple of years ago, this Herring River is essentially going to become like a private marina with a large float and a large pier, large floats, large boats every 65 feet. That's, it would be packed eventually. So I'm strongly in favor of a much larger setback of around 200 feet. I think it would help eliminate all the cumulative environmental impacts, and also just help prevent the impacts to fishing. You literally can't shellfish under a float and under somebody's large boat. So that's an impact to that shellfishing habitat. Our current regulations protect shellfish habitat even if no shellfish are present. It's been kind of diluted or modified over the years. But if you read the regulations, even if it's just proven to be habitat through such things as shell fragments, that habitat was supposed to be protected. It's kind of the discussion's gone another way somehow into these surveys and you know how many shellfish are there, but that isn't really how it was written. But that's an impact right there. I mean, the town decided to protect shellfish habitat, partially probably because people like the shellfish sometimes and they don't necessarily want a large float and boat where they were going to go shellfishing. So I do see like also a degradation of the Herring River as a public resource through these piers. And, you know, I consider that too. I think setbacks are one of the best tools. They're not ambiguous. The shellfish thing, I haven't really been a fan of those discussions. There's just, you can argue it to the end of the world and it's hard to tell who's right with the regulations, but I think a strong setback would essentially take care of pretty much all the issues. That's my comment.
Thanks, Jim. That's good thoughts there. We've debated shellfish densities so much, and it's just I've been very frustrated. We've had what I see as very high densities, and you know the consultants are able to argue that the impacts are temporary or they can be resolved by planting seeds. So yeah, I still want to work on the shellfish survey language because I think at some point you still will need them, but I tend to favor Jim's approach to really resolving impacts by just spreading things out. So thank you for that, Jim. Okay, John.
Yeah, okay. I'll talk a little bit about the shellfish survey, but I just want to respond to a couple of other things first. One is just emphasizing Jim's point about, I guess I take it to be sort of overpopulation, the potential overpopulation of the Herring River. And I actually keep my boats on the Oyster River in Chatham, and I think that's kind of Jim's nightmare of what the Herring River might turn into, because you really can't move in there barely. There are these mooring docks, and they've got as many moorings as they can possibly stuff in there, and private docks. And it would be a shame that if the Herring River began to approach anything vaguely resembling that, and I don't think anybody fishes in the Oyster River. I mean, they're oyster, they're growing oysters up in Herring Pond or whatever, but not Herring Pond, Oyster Pond. Anyway, that's one thing. Just responding to something Carolyn said about it might be beneficial to allow dredging to clear out some of the muck, but my thought about that is the kind of dredging that is typically proposed in a dock proposal is very limited in extent, and I don't think that we can expect that that would provide any broad improvement to the habitat, just dredging around somebody's dock in order for them to be able to fit their boat in there. So I don't go for that either. So I'll try to talk a few minutes about what I did with the shellfish statistics. You know, like Stan, you know, the first couple of times we had a hearing that involved the shellfish surveys, I just really did not know what to make of the numbers that were being presented to us. And frankly, I didn't think very hard about it. outside of those things. But I guess this August when it came up again and we had the presentation and I looked at the numbers and tried to figure out what the numbers really meant. And had a conversation with Pam Lindbergh about what they meant. And I was just not very satisfied with the result of any of that. And I didn't have the sense that we as a commission were knew how to use those numbers to make a decision. So, and I didn't understand them. So I went off and tried to figure it out for myself first. And I think there's two conclusions that I came up with, which I tried to lay out in a presentable way in those couple pages that I sent around. The first one is something I actually said in that meeting in August, which is, well, if you found 14 shellfish in these sample plots, they only represent 1% of the survey area. So clearly there's a lot more shellfish there. And I wasn't really thinking about any formal or rigorous basis for that, but it just seemed obvious to me. But when I went back and started thinking about the probabilities and all that other stuff, it's pretty clear that there's a very straightforward explanation for that simple observation. That, you know, aside from the complications of the biology and varying habitats and all of that, which is another subject, I think it's reasonable to say you found 14 shellfish there. It's reasonable to deduce that there's actually something like 1,400 in the area. And whether you say 1,400 or you decide to be more conservative about that and be conservative in a specific and rigorous way, you might derate that number some, and there's a rigorous way to do that, but that doesn't change the basic observation that actually it's a lot of shellfish there. So that's one thing, and there's a plot there which you can just read the x-axis, find the number of shellfish found in the entire survey, and then find where that line takes you on the y-axis, and that's the estimate for the number of shellfish in the area. It's pretty straightforward, and it could be, if we decided to work that way, that plot or some variation on that could be a tool that we use. The other observation is this other thing that I ended up with, and I found this quote in my meanderings trying to understand this stuff that I put at the front that I hope you all read, because really, to me, that just encapsulates the whole thing, which is what he says, to paraphrase, is it's easy to accept that there's a presence of some species of wildlife if you see it there, but it's not easy to deduce that there are no individuals from whatever you're looking for if you don't see them there. You don't, in fact, know that they're not there. And so in my mathematical thinking and just looking at the plain statistics, you can quantify that idea. That is, and I tried to lay out the example, which really boils down to if you don't find any shellfish, any individual shellfish in a survey like the one that Pam Newbert did, there's still some likelihood that there are shellfish there. There could be even as many as 100 shellfish or more. And so I don't think the surveys really help us, for that reason and for other reasons, help us in a way that would allow us to confidently conclude that there's an absence of shellfish almost anywhere. I mean, of course, you could take that to an extreme, and I mean, the example I use with Stan is if he's digging for clams in his front lawn and doesn't find any, then probably not reasonable to conclude that he just didn't find the ones that are there. But if you're looking at a place where people accept there's that that's reasonable shellfish habitat. My feeling is you can't really conclude, even if you find none, that there are none there for that very specific technical statistical reason, but also for all the other reasons that have been mentioned, like seasonal variability, whether or not anybody's been digging in the area recently or whatever else. So, I mean, where I end up with this is I'm just less happy with the whole idea of surveys at all at this point. So, and a question to whoever, I'm not a biologist, I don't really understand shellfish, but to Brad and others is, what do people consider a, quote, significant, unquote, density of shellfish? And my sense is we could probably talk about that for a year or two and not come to a firm conclusion, which just leads me more to the conclusion that the surveys are misleading and confusing and not helpful, and particularly in a high stakes discussion like permitting a pier on an expensive piece of waterfront property where the stakes for the owners are high, where it's a difficult conversation and you don't want to end up arguing about whether or not there are shellfish in a certain area. So I would like to see way less equivocal regulations regarding building docks anywhere where there's some suspicion that there's any shellfish habitat. And I don't know, maybe Jim and Brad are right that the way to deal with that is not deal with shellfish at all. Just place other restrictions, put other restrictions in place that are way more concrete and can be assessed way more objectively, like setbacks and whatever. So all that said, I'd be happy to work on the work with Brad on trying to refine some approach that or Brad or whoever else that does need to take into account the results of shellfish surveys. I don't think I have anything more to say.
Well, thank you, John. It's fantastic to see the thought you put into this, and I think you're bringing a lot of credentials and experiences to this, which I think needs to happen. So I think there'll always be some surveys, because I think that, you know, some of these embayments where you don't have as many impacts as the Herring River, you know, we probably have to give people a reasonable chance to propose putting in a dock and pier. And so I don't think we're going to get away from the surveys altogether, but I think we can certainly change the way we respond to them and how we interpret them as well. So, yeah, I'd like to work on that. And I think I'd like to, you know, see us come back to this fairly soon. So what do you think, Amy? You know, do you think we could come back the second meeting in November or the first meeting in December?
Well, we can shoot for the second meeting in November. I'll pencil that in for that. Then why don't we see how the discussion, you know, on the 4th and everything goes for dogs and stuff. But I'll put it in for November 18th.
Okay. And I'll definitely put some time aside to, you know, work on the recommendations that I had earlier, and then to get some photographs together, and then work with John and whoever else wants to, you know, dig deeper into the survey question. I think we've talked about it a lot, and we can probably offer something that might be helpful beyond just the town of Harwich.
Mm-hmm.
So I think.
And I think we should go on that boat ride.
Yes, I'm with you. We're doing it too late in the season, but we can still find some nice days.
Yeah.
And I think, it'd be really helpful because, shoreline protection, there's other issues that are going to come up in Herring River that could really occupy a lot of time in the next few years. And so just having a better sense of how that river functions and look at the meanders and see the scouring here and see the salt marsh, where it does well. I think that'd be a real helpful trip to have. All right. What do you think, Amy? Are we heading in a good direction with this? And you think we definitely want to have a product that we can bring in Waterways and Hines and John Rendon to discuss? And you would suggest another, well, can we even have a sit-down meeting? Probably not.
I'll talk with, we can't have a sit-down, I don't believe, because you can't have more than a certain number in a room. But we could do, well, I know Waterways, unfortunately, a few people stepped down from Waterways, so they've been having a harder time getting a quorum. But, I mean, we could try to do a joint meeting in this fashion. I know that's not ideal, but it's what we've got for now. And you also gave me a few things I want to think about, too. Not just the shellfish surveys, but technically in our regulations, we rely, the wording is town, or state mapped, or, state or town mapped shellfish habitat. And our shellfish maps are more than 10 years old because they're older than what I've been here. And from my understanding, it was primarily where shellfish have been seeded by the town. So that's also, like, if shellfish are being seeded, that brings up a few different comments about, is that a natural area for shellfish, or is that just a seeded area for the harvest of shellfish? But how valid are those maps? And we've talked a lot about that previously, about the validity of the town mapped maps, and we should chat and see if, do we want to kind of strike that language there about how things are determined to be substantial, if you will. So my animals are starting to act up, so I'm going to try to mute myself when I'm not talking. So
Okay. Well, all right. Then I think we've got some homework to do, and I look forward to putting some things together. And maybe when we get together with the other groups, we can even have like a PowerPoint presentation that has a few points that are put on the screen that help guide the discussion.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I guess we'll move on to the bog discussion then.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So I guess tonight we're just going to look at the language that I put together with comments from the subcommittee on future uses to the West Reservoir bogs, Bell's Neck bogs, and we're not going to talk about the entire management plan update, which Amy's going to chip away at when she's able to. And so I guess a question for you up front, Amy, when we have this hearing on the 4th, is it going to be on the entire management plan or just the future of the bogs?
I think we should keep it simple, and because there's going to be potentially people there who are not so interested in the whole thing. I would say for now, let's just, if conversation, people bring that up, we can certainly speak to it, but I would say let's keep it on the management of the bogs.
Okay. All right, well, that narrows our discussion tonight and also looking forward. So I am interested in, in this, say 6 months ahead of trying to make some progress on the overall plan, because I do think it kind of rolls things together, and it's a good time to revisit that too. So, all right, well, we've talked about the language a few times. I think Carolyn had some recent comments. So I guess I'd like to see us approve tonight whether we go forward with that set of options. we don't have to obviously approve an option tonight, but I think, you know, is that language sufficient to go forward with those options to have a public hearing? So that's kind of the question before us. So
just so you know,
Amy?
yeah, just wanted to let you know, so I'm still working off the draft that's all yellow lined. I mean, I put my suggestions in there, and like my wording, like I would suggest, I would change that, so obviously it looks more professional and takes out of my suggestions. And like, I'm looking at bog perimeter for one of the options here. What option am I looking at? Well, we can go through the whole thing, but just know that, oh, change the wording a little bit so it's less for you as a group and more for everybody as a whole. No, I haven't touched it much. I do, Carolyn, sorry. I did not incorporate your comments yet, but I saved them and printed them out and put them in Dropbox, I think, or emailed them. So we can, if the commission agrees, I can incorporate Carolyn's suggestions and edits too.
There was nothing substantial changing. The most striking thing in my mind was the tense of the place verb in the first sentence.
Yeah. Yep.
And most of the wills versus would. They were all, there was nothing substantial there. It was all.
No, but it's good. We want it to read well.
Yep. No, I thought Carolyn had great comments, and I think there was probably two that I wouldn't support, but it was really just I felt the meaning might change from the sentence, but otherwise I thought they all were very helpful to pick those out. I guess I might as well speak to the ones that I wasn't sure that I supported. I'm trying to find them right now. Oh, there was a point that maybe you combine in option 2 to have gradual bog naturalization, to combine points number 5 and 6 as comments that were received at recent public hearings. And I think Carolyn felt they could be combined because they were similar, but I think the TMDL, the nitrogen loading issue, is really somewhat separate from the herbicide and pesticide applications. So I would advocate keeping those separate. And then the second one was on the next page under bog perimeter. I think Carolyn was suggesting a monthly mowing from spring to November. And I don't know if I support that frequent of mowing. So that's something we probably should talk about. But of those two comments, I thought Carolyn picked up a lot of good points. And I support everything she suggested.
I put that monthly mowing in because that's what Amy did. And I put in the restrictions of the month.
For the actual months.
Yeah, because Amy's sentence was, I'd suggest allow mowing of the path every month or so, as it is an active walking trail.
Okay. Yeah, I think I just feel monthly is probably more frequently than necessary. So maybe that's something we should discuss.
I really have no idea how often it's necessary.
Yeah. Okay.
How about just saying as needed?
Who determines that, though?
As determined by the conservation agent.
Okay. So the way I'm kind of looking at this is, I think we can even probably get it a little bit farther away from the bog in some locations than we already have this year, because we have moved it. But I would treat it like we maintain our walking trails, our paths through the woods. I know, like, the Harwich Conservation Trust regularly mows the paths over at Bank Street Bogs. And the town is doing the mowing now at Bell's Neck, and it depends on how you want it to be used. That trail is very heavily used around the bogs, so it may not need it that much simply because it's getting trampled. And over time, I think it will become more so that and need less mowing. But up front, I potentially see it needing maybe once a month.
Amy, how about if we just say maintain an 8-foot path around the perimeter, et cetera, just the first sentence, and not even get into how often to mow, as that's really a maintenance issue.
Yeah, and I really don't even honestly I think 8 feet is potentially too much. Most of our trails are 4 feet wide. Maybe you want to say between 4 and 6 feet wide for this. We maintain, with the exception of Thompson's Field, which is like a wide open hallway, runway essentially. Most of our trails are 4 feet wide, but granted, they're also through woods and shrubland and whatnot. But I almost don't see the need to go to 8 feet.
This is Jim. Just wondering if I could jump in for a second. I know I've mentioned a couple times about, we've talked before about mowing the meadow areas, upland around the bogs. There's probably a total of an acre or so of what is essentially meadow now. And I had proposed maintaining that as meadow through mowing annually or biannually, depending as needed. And that would be done no more than once a year, and that would be after November 1st. But I was just wondering if everybody was in agreement with that, and if we should put a couple lines in to address that in the language. I think both the neighbors and the public and wildlife interests would all appreciate keeping that habitat as meadow. So
I agree. I'll add something to that effect shortly. And we can obviously see what everybody else thinks. I'm just going to add it so you can see it.
I would agree with Jim in that regard.
Yeah, I'd agree with Jim as well. And I guess just to further my position on the frequent mowing, I've just, over the years seen sometimes DPW get a little overzealous with mowing. So I feel like as conservation land, it should have pretty clear direction to when it happens. And you can see some poor results at times. Turtles, toads, things get chopped up if there's too much mowing. So I think having some clear direction would be a good idea.
The consideration going forward as far as the width of the path, most of the standard mowing equipment is going to be between 6 and 7 feet. If the language was not to exceed 8 feet, that may well simplify it.
We may almost hold on. Okay, sorry, I thought I was muted. With some volunteers or AmeriCorps members, myself, once we get going, we may not need a mower all the time. You may be able to accomplish it with just, one of the, a brush cutter that you walk around with, strapped to your body. That's how we do a lot of our, trails, and it's not that arduous. So in that respect, it could be any width that you really want. Maybe the first mow or something of the year is with a mower, and then after that it's more handwork.
Do you think these are questions that are really going to come up at the next meeting from the public?
No, but I think we should present what our thought out each option is. So to give them a realistic answer, because you never want somebody to be like, well, you said they were going to be 8 feet wide, but you're only keeping them 4 feet wide. Yeah, that will happen.
I have a question I'd like to kind of quantify. I was flipping through here before, and all of a sudden it struck me, if in option 2, right under where we're talking about the middle bog C, Amy, And it says,
Give me 1 second. I was working on what Jim was putting in. Option two.
Right where it's talking about middle bog C that's highlighted.
Okay.
And we talk about has viable cranberry plants. So the question I'm having is, okay, the way I'm reading it is ultimately we're going to let that naturalize into a wetland. But there's the possibility of including the pick your own farm cranberries as described in option 3, where you say as described below.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm really saying is this provision under C is really for the years 2020 to 2025 only, which is what option 3 is saying. Because what I was starting to get confused with is option 2 is naturalization, period. But then under C, we say we have maybe another possibility here in option 3. You see what I'm saying?
I mean, I read it as...
It says, has viable cranberry plants that have produced high densities of cranberries in recent years with no farming. This eastern section could be allowed to become wetland or managed for public.
Yeah, that could say as described below in section.
I would say option 3 rather than as described below, just so people know what described where below is.
Yeah, I am.
So what I'm really saying is that's just a short pick your own reference under option 2 is just for that 5-year period, right? Because the whole option 2 really was referring to the whole naturalization of the bogs.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was questioning right now. I'm just trying to clarify what we're saying here under option 2.
I understand. I'm just trying to figure out how to word it.
Because it didn't strike me until I was flipping through it before. Option 2 is the title is gradual bog naturalization, period.
Right.
But then we have a reference in C of not naturalized section of it.
So then instead of saying or managed for public pick your own cranberries, if you don't want to allude to a different option in option 2, I would just say this section would be allowed to be allowed to naturalize if you want to.
That's what I was questioning. I wasn't sure what we were trying to say is option 2.
I get what you're trying to separate. So it's up to the commission if they want to leave kind of the wording how it is now, where it says could become wetland or just naturalize. Maybe we just say instead of could be allowed to become wetland. We don't know for certain what it's going to become. We think it's going to be wetland, but I would just say maybe we say allowed to naturalize.
Well, under option 3, we're throwing in only that 5-year time period for pick your own.
Right. So I was going to suggest removing that language about pick your own from option 2, or from the language in option 2, so it's not in conflict with what the option is. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So
or if you left it in option 2, then I'm saying, so you're really talking the period of 5 years only.
That's up to you guys.
Well, no, I'm not trying to make a decision. I was reading this and I was confused as to what we're really saying is what I'm saying. I'm asking.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say to make it clear, that maybe separate 2 and 3 a little bit better. And I think it's a good point. You know, I wrote it that way, but I just want people to have an option to consider.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's almost, you could have a blending of option 2 and 3, but let's make it as clear as we can.
Okay, I did change that, so let me know what you think.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm changing the bog perimeter language a little bit. I'm also trying to change, add what Jim suggested. And we didn't really kind of come up with a frequency for the mowing of the path.
Well, there's 2 lines of thoughts. Either spell out real low frequency or leave it at the discretion of the conservation agent. You know, so I'm okay with that.
I just want to make sure that I'm acting appropriately. Like if I think it needs to be mown, because people are getting, complaining of a million ticks walking around there, but but the commission doesn't think it's time to mow. I don't want myself and you folks to be at odds, so.
Yeah, I guess I just don't want to see what the decisions would be made, say, by just the DPW staff. And
no, it's okay. I mean, I have an idea for what you want. I mean, if it's a few inches long, no, it doesn't need to be mown. If it's, up to halfway up to your knees, then you need to trim it,
Yeah.
I don't think we can be too prescriptive about it anyway, because it'll be different every year. Yeah. If it's a dry summer, it'll be one thing. If it's a wet summer, it'll be something else. So somebody's going to have to make the judgment call.
Yeah, we're saying we're going to maintain the path, Amy. So maybe you could just say and include occasional mowing as necessary.
Okay.
And that leaves it wide open for interpretation, and no one can criticize you whether you do it or don't.
Okay.
I would agree with that. And in addition, I think it's very important to recognize your professional ability in this regard, and for the commission to stand by that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I thought we always do stand behind Amy.
You do, but occasional mowing of the path at the direction of the conservation administrator may occur. Okay, so bog perimeter, I can change the footage, but I said maintain a 4 to 6 foot path around the perimeter and of all bog sections that could function as an upland meadow. I don't want to call it an upland meadow border, but I just want to function as a walking trail. Occasional mowing of the path will be at the direction of the conservation administrator. The meadow area around the bog is to be mown once per year after November 1 to keep out woody vegetation.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. Do folks want to go, commissioner to commissioner and just have any additional comments, or are people happy that they've voiced their concerns or comments?
I just had one other suggestion, Brad, that what we were talking about with 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just the tiny one. Under the bog site objectives in 2, Amy, we have A on map, B on map, and then C and D. If we had on map for consistency.
Oh, sure. Yes.
And then I was looking. But the reason I brought that up is because if we go down to option 3, if we take it out of option 2, it's still about the 3rd line down. It says this option could be integrated with option 2.
Okay. Yep.
And then you might just refer to C on map, C, quote, C on the map. As to what we're talking about of integrating in option 2.
Got it.
You agree?
That's good. I do.
That way we've taken it out of 2 as if nothing were going to happen there. It was just going to be full naturalization. But we'd have this, well, I guess now I got a question on that. So you really have 2 options, 2 and 3, that you could possibly be doing.
There's nothing saying you can't.
Right.
Hybrid.
That's what I'm saying. So you'd say option 2 is long-term and option 3 is a short-term.
You could.
Okay. I'm just trying to clarify in my own mind. That's all.
They don't, I think the point is correct that they don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive.
I'm sorry for being so thick, but just the light went off for me, that's all.
You're not. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, some of that language is there in the first paragraph of option 3. All right. How do folks feel? Do we want to approve this language as it is, or do we have any more discussion?
I'm happy to approve the language as it is. I think it's great. Thank you all for doing this, Amy and Brad and Jim and Mark.
All right, and I think we're going to have a public session. We'll get comments back, and then we can, this isn't the last time we're going to see this language. So I feel pretty comfortable about that.
I was going to ask, we do have a couple of new filings that came in. They're RDAs, I think. And I think technically we have 1 doc on for next time, but who knows if they're going to come or it's going to continue. I'll check with Channel 18, I'll check with the schedule. Is there any way people could start the meeting? I mean, I was thinking of leading the meeting next time with, this discussion, say an hour. Basically carve out thinking in my mind about an hour at least for this. Could we start at 6 or 5:30? Can people do that?
I'm fine with either.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, I'm flexible.
I'd prefer 6 o'clock if I had a druther.
Hey, an extra half an hour will make a big difference at the end of the night. So let's plan on that, but I will verify with, scheduling of the meetings to make sure that's fine.
Amy, in a very optimistic thought, what if this public meeting only goes half an hour?
Well, I'm not going to put a time.
30, can we move into our own meeting at 6?
Yeah.
Don't we have to post the time of of our meeting, the conservation meeting?
No, I mean, the whole meeting is a Conservation Commission meeting. It's not an executive session. So we'll post the meeting like we do always. We'll start the meeting at 6. We'll do this hearing first. I was just meaning like in my mind how long it might take.
Okay.
But we would do the hearings after that. And I would let the applicants for the regular hearings know that we're going to be doing this first.
Okay, so this public meeting isn't a meeting that has to be opened and then closed.
No, it's a hearing, just like any of your other hearings. And it's my suggestion that you do it first, but that's totally up to you. I just think you might get potentially 1 or 2 more people attending if you do it at the beginning rather than after the hearing, so people don't have to listen through all the other wetlands hearings.
Yeah, no, I agree.
We always put this at the end for discussion. I think it's for the public hearing on this. I think we should have it at the beginning.
I agree, and I think we should put it like a 1-hour block. And we don't want to go over that, but if we do, it's okay. But I think we should endeavor to get it done in an hour.
That's what I mean, is kind of set it. I mean, we'll see how things go, but we'll see what the rest of the schedule looks like. I'm not going to.
I think that your call, Brad. If it's Brad's call, and maybe if you make that known at the beginning of the meeting, then if the discussion is extremely productive, we want to continue it as opposed to stop it at an hour. If it's not productive, you want to stop it.
Yeah, I almost don't think you need to make it known at the beginning. Just let it flow and see where you end up. I mean, we don't want to spend 3 hours on it. We can't with everything else, but hopefully it won't require that.
Yeah, I think I will set some ground rules just to try to make it not go too far. And, but, we have had 2 public sessions on this, and, there wasn't huge participation, so I'm hoping it might be that way.
Mm-hmm.
But, we're not going to shut people down.
Right.
But I think if we can just kind of get some focus and, try to do it in an hour, that would be good. All right.
Sounds good. So I'll verify, but we'll schedule the meeting. It's just 6 o'clock on November 4th.
Okay. And Amy, the farming option number 3 does invoke the tech and the possibility of having some, interactive type of things, educational components.
Yep.
Should we reach out to them directly and say, hey, because that really was a concept that came out of, I think, Leo, maybe?
Yeah, but I thought he was more interested in having his Main Street bog potentially, which we have to talk about that real soon too, because his lease is coming up this coming year. I thought he was, maybe he meant for bogs in general, talking to the tech, but I thought he was more meaning for his lease at the Main Street bog that maybe the tech could be a part of it. But I have no problem. I have no problem reaching out to them if you want to include them in a conversation.
Yeah, I think, we're invoking their name as an option. I think in concept, it's good. It doesn't mean it's a good idea practically. But I think maybe to invite them to review it and attend if they want to, if they have an interest.
Yep.
And maybe even the high school, it's, that educational piece, I think, needs a champion, someone to step forward and want to lead it, want to, be involved with it. I don't think we're going to push that on our own. We might, but I think it probably would take somebody who really wants to make it happen with students, outside of our group.
Yeah. I know the horticulture teacher over at the tech.
Okay.
And I'll reach out to Monomoy too, but I don't have a close contact over there, but I'll send an email, you know, to whatever appropriate department essentially over there.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good. Do we need to formally vote on this? Is it just something to put out
You
there?
would vote to, yeah, let's just, so it's formal, vote to, you know, that put forward these as your management options to be on a public hearing on November 4th.
Okay. All right, well then I'll go ahead and move that we accept the written options as discussed today and previously to be presented as options for a public hearing on November 4th, 2020.
I'll second.
All right, thanks, Carolyn. Any discussion? I guess we've looked.
Yeah, I did. Hey, Brad, it's Stan again. I do have a question. At one of the meetings when we were discussing this, we were talking about should we have our recommendation as a
yeah, that did come up. Yeah, I guess I'm still uncertain. You know, we're going to have a vote after this at some point, and
it is in the document which one we prefer, isn't it?
Well, it discusses the general sentiment that came out of the last two public discussions, and yeah, it's still a good question, Stan. I don't know. I think we should feel like we want to speak about that during the public hearing. You know, the public's going to want to hear the basis for what we're leaning towards.
It does say in option 2, this option has received the most support among Conservation Commission members during the 2 most recent public hearings, discussions due to blah, blah, blah. But they weren't public hearing. I'm just going to say public discussions.
Okay.
I guess my question is, at this point of the process, should we have our, agreed upon recommendation? I don't know, as opposed to, getting into a big discussion during this meeting between different commissioners.
But I thought the point of this hearing was just to get public comment on it.
Yeah, I don't think we front load a vote, honestly. I think we should, listen to what the public has to say. And my thought was tonight we would vote on approving the present language to go forward on a given date. So I see what you say, Stan. It might be helpful for the public to know. But if they read this, I think they're going to see that, there's more support for option 2 or a hybrid of option 3, but that option 1 and option 4 are still there to be considered. Okay. So I kind of, yeah.
No, again, I was just raising the question just to make sure that that's what we want to do this way. And it sounds good to me. I agree with you, Brad.
Okay.
I think it's expressed nicely in that paragraph. It says it's received the most support due to these reasons, but it doesn't show that we're coming in with a de facto conclusion. I think it's worded nicely.
Okay. Mark and Jim, you guys are subcommittee members. How do you feel about this issue?
Yeah, I feel like we should just vote for the vote on the language and see how the public hearing goes.
Okay.
I pretty much agree with the fact that we need to vote on the language, regardless of the fact that I don't support the whole concept. I've been a little clear about that right from the beginning. My opinion is not going to change. I think the posture should be radically different, but it's not going to be. But the language, I think, is as graceful as it can be, and I think it's pretty explicit. I think it's relatively easy to understand as well.
I appreciate that, Mark. Okay, well then we have a motion that's been seconded. We've had discussion. I guess I'll call a roll call to see who's in favor by stating aye, starting with Stan.
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Mark?
Nay.
Jim?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And myself, Brad Chase, aye. So we have 6 approving and one dissent. Okay. Thanks, Amy, for doing all the heavy lifting and getting this together.
It wasn't bad. Sorry I couldn't do the whole document.
No,
We'll
that's
get
a
there.
lot.
We'll get there.
That's a 10-year thing. I'm excited. We worked on 2 pretty big topics tonight under discussion, so
Yeah.
it's nice to make some progress.
Yep. Next, well, maybe not next meeting. I'll put it on there if we get to it, but we need to have an executive session. Because we do need to make a decision on something, but it's not too time sensitive.
If you want to knock off those minutes?
Yeah. And I think I just have an announcement or 2, but if you want to do, Melissa drafted them. I have not read them, but I'm going to bring them up. So if you have changes. She's doing phenomenal, by the way. And Nikki, I talked to her today. She's doing well too, and looking forward to joining us again in about a month. Oh, we have a new AmeriCorps member that I've been spending between 1 and 2 days a week with training as well. So, a lot of work kind of at the beginning, and then afterwards, not so much. So, but Caroline is a wonderful member, as they always are. So. All right.
You want some comments, Amy?
Please.
All right. I had a couple. Start on page 3.
No, let me get down there. Yeah.
In the second paragraph, about midway down, the line starts with RDA in 2015. She thinks it would be a good way to get the changes on record. Next sentence says, when visiting the site with the commissioners and the owners.
Hang on, I'm on page 3, paragraph 2. Starts with Chairman Brad Chase?
No, the paragraph above that.
Okay, maybe it's a little different on my thing. Yeah. Okay.
In the middle of that paragraph, there's a sentence that says, when visiting the site with the commissioners and the owners.
Yeah.
And then after that, it says, and states that beyond it is pretty natural.
Okay.
There's something missing with that sentence.
Yeah.
Then on page 5, under the order of conditions, the amended order of conditions for Winchmere Harbor. There's a paragraph that starts with the Tom Mulcahy.
Sorry, I'm still on the first one. I'm sorry, I can't figure out what it's trying to say. And believes that the commission will likely have approved this work as an RDA. Okay, sorry. I just want to make these changes while I'm sitting here.
That's fine, sure.
And actually, there's an A missing from approved. I just omitted a lot of that. Okay. Next one.
Page 5. The paragraph starts with Tom Mulcahy.
All right, give me 1 second. I think my justification is a little off from yours.
Yeah.
For some reason. Tom Mulcahy.
Yeah, the second sentence says the arrival sequence has been reoriented since the previous plan was approved. You're talking about access to the beach, I think. Rather, I'm not sure if that word sequence is appropriate.
I don't think it's access to the beach. I think it's access at the bottom of the hill and probably to the new building that's going to be the restaurant.
That's not the beach.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, it's not the arrival sequence. It's just a driveway.
Your entrance.
Or the next sentence you say by reorienting the entry drive. So maybe you just say the entry drive has been reoriented, but that's kind of.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I just did.
Yeah, all right. And then the last sentence in that same paragraph, it says, but they're happy to work with Amy if, I think is what you mean, is instead of of.
Yep.
And then 2 paragraphs down from there, it starts with Chairman Brad Chase.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about Andrew Singer, one of the project engineers. He's
an attorney.
Yeah.
All right, give me 1 second. The dog is crying to go outside.
In a general observation, if you remember, we approved Witchmere to put down a particular kind of sod, an Arnold Palmer or some kind of a golfer's name of the sod that we allow them to put down by the area what they call the wedding area.
Yes.
They have put down that sod, and if it doesn't require irrigation and doesn't require fertilization, it is amazing because it is bright green and lush.
Really?
It's beautiful. At least
the micro clover, because I took a site visit there in the middle of summer. And I mean, it's irrigated because that area has always been irrigated, but they're not, supposedly they're not using chemicals. They said they're not. The micro clover is not so micro. It looks like regular clover, but I really don't think, I mean, it looks fine to me and they don't seem to mind it. And I mean, this year they really didn't do much business because of COVID, but yeah, I mean, it's came in thick.
Right now they have a big tent up.
Yeah.
Maybe they took
so far they seem pleased with it, but it's the first year and first year things look different sometimes than what they look a few years down the road. But
from the harbor it looks spectacular.
The last
called Players Best is what it's called.
Players Best.
Yeah, it's in there. Yeah.
Amy, the last question I had for you was under the executive session. The first item that you talk about mentions.
Wait, if we're talking about. Oh, like what's on this right here? What's on these minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not talking about executive session minutes, just the language here that is in the
Language
regular.
here. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because in the language here, you talk, the first paragraph mentions that we were talking about the negotiating position of the board on the property at Zero Headwaters Drive.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we should get that specific. I mean, it struck me that these negotiations are very non-public at this point. So rather than putting this specific information in our public minutes, I would.
That's how it had to be on the agenda. We pretty much cut and pasted from the agenda.
Oh, so it's already out there then?
Yeah, and I think that was legally the way we had to do it. I know what you're saying, though.
Yeah.
Well, even like so on selectmen's agendas, they'll say wording just like this.
Okay, that's fine then if that's the case. I'll leave that up to you.
That's what I've been told.
All right, those are the only comments I had on
that. Amy, this is Jim. Just while we're touching on Witchmere, did that beach naturalization occur as prescribed?
They, well, yes. I mean, I talked to Bill Ganchard about that. I'll double check with him now, but they really haven't been doing anything to the beach area. One, because of COVID, and two, because we said not to. But last time I checked, which was probably in August, they have just been letting it go to naturalize.
I think they were supposed to put in some, what do you call that?
Symbolic fencing.
Symbolic fencing, and there was a certain amount of, a small amount of beach grass planting, I believe, as well.
Yep, I'll check on that.
Yeah, that was supposed to be done right away because it was mitigation for the violation they had with the tiki hut, right?
Yeah.
I haven't been down there since June, so I haven't seen it.
Okay, planting and naturalization. I will get a hold of Bill Ganchard tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have any comments on the minutes.
All right, I gotta go let the dog in, barking. So if you're gonna vote, that's fine. I'm just gonna mute it so you don't hear me jumping.
Everyone else okay with the minutes? Very thorough. All right, I move we accept the minutes for August 19th, 2020.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye, starting with Stan.
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Mark?
I will abstain. I wasn't there.
Okay. And Jim?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Myself, Brad Chase, aye. So motion carries. All right, well, thank Melissa for us. What a job.
Yep, she's doing great.
Yeah. John,
Keeping us
thank you.
afloat at only part-time.
Yep. Thank you for your manuscript, John. I hope you have success publishing.
I don't think so, Brad.
John, tell them what you told me the other day when I was looking at the algae in your pond, that you ran it by your wife and what she told you.
Oh, well, yeah, the first version, which you will be happy to hear, was like 12 or 14 pages long. I shared it with my wife, and I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was pretty clear. She thought I was nuts to be trying to share that with other people. People who don't do math every day. So.
Your mind works in a way mine doesn't.
I do math, but a different type of math than yours.
That's my happy place. What can I say?
You understand it. You know, that's fantastic. I apply math, but I run tests. You actually understand the theory behind it, so that's impressive.
So Skinnaquit Pond is having an algae bloom, has been for the past week or two. It's not the pond, the whole pond isn't bright green, but John can tell you it's cloudy. There's filamental segments in the pond. I think you said somebody from APCC was down. Myself and Heinz have looked at it, posted the public access that we do have to the pond. But
no one from APCC came, as far as I know. We sent the pictures to APCC.
Oh, yes, right.
Or the first ones, the time it took several weeks ago. I remember when it was, but then this week it's come back pretty obviously.
And about a month ago too, we had a fairly good bloom in West Reservoir too, right around the time where Dinah probably took the first pictures of yours.
Is that the toxic algae, John?
Well, I don't know.
We're not 100% what it.
I guess I haven't done the bottle test. I probably should go out there, but I, of course, would love to be able to just determine whether it's toxic or not on my own. I can, and I know how to do that. Even if I had a microscope, I wouldn't know what to do with it. But something I read, and I told you I would send this to you, Amy, and I haven't done that. I'll do that right now.
No worries.
There's a thing they call the bottle test where they claim you collect a water sample, you shake it up and then put it in the fridge for, I don't know, overnight or 24 hours. And if the algae all floats to the top, the green algae, if there's a skim, it's like the cream on top of unhomogenized milk, then you can be pretty sure that it's maybe not absolutely certain, but it's a sign that it's the toxic kind. I would like to see the town somehow supporting tests for toxic algae. It appears that this is going to become a bigger problem. I understand that Barnstable has a biologist on staff whose job it is to sample the ponds, and APCC has a program, but it's I don't know how it's funded. I know last year they were talking about looking for funding so they could expand the program, but if we wanted to do it at Skinnaquit, we'd have to pay up, and I haven't really run that down.
Yeah, APCC would charge us, and I don't know how much would charge the town to be testing, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but we've gotten last year we got varying results from the state lab versus what APCC said, like drastically.
Oh, really?
Drastically, they both agreed it was the toxic kind that we had in West Reservoir last year, but the concentrations were way off from each other. So we do have a kit. I believe Health and Natural Resources bought a kit. And I was mentioning this to you, John. I will check on the status of that, if we actually have it in-house or not. We have a kit where we're going to get a kit, if we don't already have it, with test strips. And you get a certain amount of strips in your first package. And then after that, you can get other, sets of these test strips. But we have we have microscopes, we have the equipment.
Sounds like the woman in Barnstable is doing visual assays in a microscope, but has some other way of sorting the cells beforehand. They didn't explain that, but is there someone in town qualified to look at these things in a microscope and say what they are?
I'm not sure, maybe Heinz. I mean, myself, when I worked in the town of Eastham, actually, I did, so this was 9 years ago. I mean, I did look at a lot of samples there because we did it. And
I see.
Blue-green, the toxic blue-green has a very distinctive string of pearls that look under a microscope. I probably could pick that out again. And but on the other hand, you would always err on the side of caution. The other thing is there's usually always some level of algae, even toxic algae in any pond. It's just at what concentration does it become really toxic and you shouldn't be in the water. So you could get a sample that shows, yes, we have Anabina, which is the toxic blue-green. But then it comes into, well, at what concentration? And my view is always, you know, if it's the summer month and you're getting it, then you should post the pond as an advisory, you know.
Right.
I'll try to follow up with that. I've been meaning to. About the status of what the town has. Because he does have, well, I know with COVID it's been impacted, but, you know, the PALS program with water quality testing, you would hope we could just piggyback on that.
John, there's also a study in Stony Brook and Brewster going on that I'm somewhat involved with, and I can check with the lead researcher to see if she has any ability to add new systems onto her sampling. And her whole angle is the river herring and whether these algae impact river herring. And she's working with APCC too, but I'll check and see if she could add something on.
Well, we have herring in this pond too, so.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be fabulous.
She is finding the algae in the herring, which I never would have guessed.
Oh, gee.
So that, you know, you think they feed on zooplankton, yet they might be selecting the algae or just ingesting it accidentally. But she is finding it in the guts of the juvenile herring.
Wow. Wow. So does she have any idea, or anybody have any idea what effect that has on the biology of the herring?
No, I think that they're trying to find out the occurrence and then looking at different metrics of, you know, growth and survival to see if there's, you know, any relations there. So it is an interesting question. I expected they were very selective to, you know, grabbing larger zooplankton, but they may just be foraging and taking in the smaller cells of algae while they do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Anything else new? I don't mind adjourning.
Just one quick thing. I did send you, I think, an invite to Wacoit Bay Reserve webinar for next Friday about mosquito ditching and salt marshes and stuff like that. It looked pretty interesting from 10 to 12. So check that out if you can. If you need the link again, let me know, or you can just go on the Wacoit Bay website. Ernie and I were on a conference call today with the American Climatological something. It's a 4-part series. But a lot of today was, and it's all about climate change and impacts both to, you know, natural resources and to people and to the economy and things like that. But we just started getting into it today. It's a 4-part series, so.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's a good series.
Yeah.
Climate change is going to produce more algae blooms there, John, too.
Everything. But no, that's it, Brad. If you want to adjourn, I'll be quiet.
Okay. Well, I'll move that we do adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, we got a second on the floor. All those in favor, we'll go through the roll call, starting with Stan. Say aye.
Aye.
Ernie.
Aye.
Carolyn.
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
Jim.
Aye.
John,
Aye.
myself, Brad